All right, we are now live. So I am so excited, everyone. Today I'm here with Mickey Rowe. And for those who don't know Mickey Rowe is a professional autistic actor. He blew up everywhere, having the lead role on The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, and has done some incredible work with the National Disability Theater, has a very unique voice within our autism community. And I'm really glad to have the opportunity because for people out there who are watching this, this is the first time we're actually talking in person with each other. I feel like we know like everyone, like all of our friends know us, but we haven't had the opportunity. So Mickey, how are you doing today?
I'm doing so well. Thank you for that beyond kind introduction. And it's such an honor to get to be talking with you here today and also talking with all of your incredible followers and fans.
Absolutely. So for everyone watching at home, I'm going to ask Mickey a few questions today. In addition to that, if you have any questions, feel free to write them in the comments. In addition, definitely give Mickey a look on social media. I've included all of his social media channels in the comments. So give him a like and just hear more about the incredible work he is doing. So Mickey, the first question, it's very broad in nature, but I ask it to every single self-advocate I interview. What would you like the world to know about you?
Gosh, what would I like the world to know about me? I think I'm going to even answer that a little more generally and just say what I would like the world to know about autistic people in general. I feel like since I work in theater, often we do in theater something called sensory-friendly performances, where a theater decides that they want to invite more autistic people into their audiences. So they do a sensory-friendly performance. And I think something that I've talked with a lot of autistic people about that I wish the whole world, the whole non-autistic world understood a little bit better was that oftentimes I feel like sensory-friendly performances are not actually for the autistic people, but are more for the other audience members around us. Because autistic people in a situation like that, like we are going to stim whether we're at a sensory-friendly performance or a normal performance. We are going to be ourselves and focus on the shows in the ways that work best for us, no matter what kind of situation we're in. But I think what a sensory-friendly performance does really well is it educates the non-autistic people that we are okay. We know how to function in this world that was not created for us fairly well. And for non-autistic people just to not be so concerned about us all the time and know that if we are stimming or if we are communicating in a way that might be different than what you expect, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with us. We're not in trouble. We are not, we don't need extra help, that we are just taking care of ourselves, and you can take care of yourself in the way that's best for you, and we can take care of ourselves in the ways that are best for us. So I think in general, I wish that non-autistic people knew that autistic people have been living in worlds that weren't created for them for a long time, and we're very good problem solvers, and to just ask us what we need and then listen and trust us when we tell you. If we say we can do something, believe us. If we say that we need an accommodation for something, believe us when we say that as well.
I absolutely love that, especially because you mentioned sensory friendly. And I know that Broadway, before COVID, did the Autism Theater Initiative and did some great work with there. And I know you do a lot of work in the Broadway community and just the theater community in general. So, Mickey, what started your passion for theater? Can you break down a little bit about that? In addition to, so theater therapy helped me tremendously growing up with autism. Was there any correlation between theater and helping you come out of your shell?
Absolutely, without a doubt. I was not as lucky as you, Carrie, to get to do any official theater therapy. I was mostly doing speech therapy and occupational therapy that was non-theater related. But I really found as a kid that, and as an adult as well, that I was able to function much more easily in the world when I had the lens of a specific role that I was interacting with the world through. So for instance, like an interview like this is really easy for me because the roles are really clear and specific and laid out, right? You're the interviewer, you ask the questions and I answer them and I'm supposed to sound smart and maybe funny, right? And that's a really specific role, just like if I was at a doctor's office or something. Whereas if we were peers who met on the street, we wouldn't have those specific roles that tell us how to interact. So it might be more challenging for me interacting if I just happen to see you on the street as peers, because we don't have the lens of a specific role that we are communicating through. But so growing up with theater, I very quickly found that if I was able to take on a role that gave me a lens that I didn't otherwise have. So I would often dress up as a clown when I was younger and not leave the house unless I was dressed up as a clown, or dress up as a pirate. My grandparents lived on the waterfront and built a little raft for me. And I would always be dressed up as a pirate on the raft. And it just made my life a lot easier because I know what the social rules are for being a pirate. I've sat in movies. I know how pirates act. I know what the social rules are for being a clown. I've seen that on TV shows. I know how I'm supposed to act as a clown. But if I had just been Mickey myself, I hadn't seen that before. I didn't know how I was supposed to interact with the world or what was expected of me in quite the same way as I did when I was dressed up. So I think I've always been taking on roles just to make the rules of interaction a little bit clearer for myself. That led me to stilt walking, and I, all through college, paid my way through college and through theater school doing street performing and stilt walking, where I got to interact with people, but with the specific lens of me being high up above them in a costume, interacting as a character. And then that eventually led to me getting to stilt walk at Seattle Opera in La Boheme and doing theater.
Nice, nice. I was just about to ask where you attended. That's awesome. And Mickey, so obviously, and we'll get a little bit to how Curious Incident came about and just currently what you're doing today. But obviously the hot topic that is currently around in our autism community today is with Sia and the current Sia controversy. When the trailer went up, for people at home who don't know, Sia is coming out with a film in 2021 called Music. And one of the main protagonists in the film is this nonverbal girl played by Maddie Siegler. Maddie Siegler, you may know as this incredibly talented teenager who was in, who really is very well known for being in Sia's Chandelier music video, and she will be playing the main role. And I guess after that Twitter just exploded. Everybody was talking about authentic representation. And then, Mickey, you wrote a very beautiful and authentic post for the Huffington Post, a blog, basically talking about your perspective. What inspired you to do that? And what was your initial reaction when you saw that there was going to be a main protagonist, but it wasn't going to be an autistic actor?
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily surprised. I feel like this has been happening for so long. We know from places like the Ruderman Family Foundation that have done studies, and places like the Ford Foundation that did a very similar study to the one the Ruderman Family Foundation did. We know that 95% of disabled roles are played by non-disabled actors. We know that when a non-disabled actor plays a disabled role and is nominated for an Oscar, 50%, you have a 50% chance of winning an Oscar if you're nominated, if you are a non-disabled actor playing a disabled role. So I was in no way surprised, because this is really just the norm of the culture we're living in right now. But I did think it was a moment that we needed to take to just help educate people. I don't think people like Sia are trying to be malicious when they do this in any way, but we definitely need to help educate them. Because I think one of the major problems is whoever we see on stage or on screen or on a movie, right? When we see someone or don't see someone on screen or on stage, that's a value statement that our society is making, right? When we see autistic actors playing autistic roles or playing any role, if we see autistic actors on our stages, on our TV screens, on our computer screens, that is a statement that our society values these people, our society values us. When we are telling stories about autism, but not even including actually autistic people in the telling of these stories about autism, that is also a value statement that we don't really value autistic voices. We don't even value them enough to allow them to tell their own stories. We don't value them enough to include them in these stories that are about them. So I think that's a major part of it. And I think another major part of it is often people say, well, it's called acting, so we don't need to do this, right? Are we going to have a only let firefighters play firefighters, and all sorts of people say kind of ridiculous things like that sometimes. And I think what they are, the piece of the puzzle that they're missing there is how this affects our community in real life beyond what we see in the screen, right? So for instance, we know that 85% of college graduates on the autism spectrum are unemployed. There was a study done, I think, a few years ago, and it stated that 85% of college graduates on the autism spectrum are unemployed. And a lot of that, I think, that's not because people on the autism spectrum are less skilled than others. It just has to do with preconceived notions that others have before they ever even meet us. And a lot of those stereotypes people have in their head come from the media, right? So when I got to play Christopher Boone in The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, for instance, I was not only affecting the theater community, but I was affecting other industries as well, because every business leader in any industry that came to see that show got to see an autistic person doing great work on stage at the highest level there was, and they got to think to themselves, oh, you know what, autistic people, I can hire disabled people. I can hire people with developmental disabilities. There's no reason for me to discriminate. So when we do hire autistic actors, when we do show the whole world how skilled people with disabilities can be, how talented they can be, and that they can do this work on the stage that is US media, we're really also educating all the other industries that they as well can hire people with disabilities. And that's a big power and also a big responsibility that the entertainment industry has that they should really take seriously.
Absolutely. And I definitely like, especially I was just reading before we jumped on this about the Oscars talking about adding diversity elements for you to be nominated for Academy Award. And I absolutely love that idea. So I guess the other side of when this Sia controversy really broke out was there were a few amount of people who were writing and saying things on the lines of, well, The Good Doctor, Freddie Highmore, is not autistic and was nominated for a Golden Globe for its portrayal. And then we had other people who were saying, like Claire Danes, who played Temple Grandin in the HBO film. They were saying, well, she won a Golden Globe and an Emmy for her portrayal. What would you say to people who are kind of seeing this not as a quote unquote big deal? I feel like I'm seeing that a lot, especially on social media.
Yeah, well, I think for a long time, right, dating back to Rain Man, like autistic people have not been allowed to have voices in conversations about autism. The conversations about autism have been really led by non-autistic people for the most part. And that tide is slowly changing. So it's not necessarily that it wasn't wrong before. It's that our culture is growing, and that's a great thing. It's a great thing that people continue to educate themselves, right? And again, I don't think that The Good Doctor was in any way being malicious. when they cast Freddie Highmore. I don't think that that Claire Danes was in any way being malicious. I think that everyone is always doing the best that they can with the knowledge that they have in that moment. And so our job is just to continue to educate people in as kind of a way as possible, so that they can see things from our perspective, and hopefully slowly the culture will change. This is not going to be the last time that autistic people are, this is not going to be the last time a major movie is made about autism, where the makers of that movie feel it's unnecessary to speak to actually autistic people or hire actually autistic people. It's not the last time, but we just need to continue slowly trying to educate people. I think when I was working with National Disability Theater, something that I often tried to tell myself and remind myself is, as easy as it is to try to use call out culture or cancel culture, right?
Yep.
Really, what's more helpful, I think, sometimes everything is necessary, right? It all has its place. It's all necessary. All these things work together. But what I've really tried to do is think that I need as many allies on my team as possible. And everyone, even people who may have in the past done things that have really been hurtful or not helpful for the autistic community, they are potential allies who just haven't been educated yet. So my job is to figure out where someone is at on their learning journey, meet them wherever it is that they're at on their learning journey, take their hand, and then figure out at what speed we can walk together over to where I want them to be, right? And some people, you can hold their hand and run over that way. Sometimes you gotta kind of slowly tiptoe in the direction you want them to go. But so correct, this has been happening for a long time, but we just have to continue slowly trying to educate people on why representation is so important, why representation matters. Yeah.
Because I feel like at the end of the day, also what we're having a conversation about is people with disabilities make up the largest minority in the United States. And I feel like a lot of the times we're talking about different roles and how, for example, I remember when, and obviously there's differences between race and disability, but when Ghost in the Shell came out and Scarlett Johansson was casted as the lead role, a lot of people were upset because she's a Caucasian woman playing in a role that was ideally, and then also when the new James Bond movie was coming out, people were kind of slamming because they were talking about Idris Elba and they were talking about how he might get the role. And they're like, well, James Bond is supposed to be Caucasian. And it feels like we hear so much about these topics of representation, and we really need to do a better job overall of just making sure that they have the opportunities. I feel like if Sia came out and she said, she didn't mention that she auditioned one actor, but it was too uncomfortable for her on set.
And I think,
you know, it was like,
I think, let me break that into two parts. I also heard that Sia had auditioned one actor. I feel like we know from the casting world, right? You also work in this industry, and you know that if a movie's auditioning non-autistic people, they don't audition one non-autistic person and then say, oh, they weren't the right fit, cancel the movie, we can't do it. No, they audition hundreds and hundreds of non-autistic people, hoping that one of those will be the right fit. And so similarly, you and I both know 20% of the population has a disability, according to the US Census. Currently one out of 58 people are on the
one in 54, one in 58. So something
like that are on the autism spectrum. And you and I both know, because autistic people, just to get by in our society, autistic people are currently acting as neurotypical every day. We are acting every day to try to mask, to try to pass as neurotypical, so that we don't get discriminated against. And many of us have gotten very good at it to be able to function in this society. You and I know so many autistic actors. So for her to say that she only found one autistic actor to audition for the role, just to me makes me feel like she actually didn't do her research. She didn't try to do any outreach to the autistic community. If she had reached out to Autistic Self-Advocacy Network and said, hey, can you send me some female autistic actors between this and this age, they would have had so many submissions. If she had reached out to an agent named Gail Ford Williamson at KMR, who represents so many people with disabilities, and said, hey, we've heard you're the go-to agent for representing people with disabilities, Gail, can you send us some female actors on the spectrum between these ages? They would have had hundreds of submissions.
Yeah, the Miracle Project with Joanne Laura. I mean, Atypical. They casted like 8 autistic actors in the second season of Atypical. Yeah. I didn't mean to cut you off by any means, but there was one emphasis also that bothered me. This film has millions and millions of dollars to produce. Why couldn't they do some form of a sensory friendly set? Why couldn't they made a reasonable accommodation to try to make it more accommodating? I feel like they may have, but the fact that that was kind of thrown under the scope also has a lot to do with the unfair work placements for a lot of people with disabilities not receiving reasonable accommodations.
Absolutely. When I was auditioning for The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, when I was auditioning for the role for the Broadway replacement cast and for the national tour, there was a stage in the audition process where we all came in for a 2-day long audition. And the first of those days was a movement audition. So they had narrowed it down to, I think, the 6 final Christophers, and we were all in a room together doing the movement. And I won't say which individual it was, but one of the people on the team of casting directors, producers, and directors came up to me right before the movement audition started and said, Mickey, we know that people on the spectrum often are very uncomfortable with movement. So if you don't want to do the movement part of the audition, you don't need to. And they were trying to be kind, of course, I think, and make it accessible. But the reason they'd said that is because the fictional character of Christopher cannot be touched. He's very sensory adverse, right? He cannot be touched. And that was their only touch point with autism so far, was that fictional character. And so then they had assumed anyone else who they might consider auditioning also would be unable to do the role, possibly because the role involves a lot of touching other actors. And since Christopher can't touch other people, probably all autistic people can't. When in reality, I'm sensory seeking, right? I am always trying to find more proprioceptive input. And so that's the kind of thing that I love more than anything. But they didn't know that because their only touch point had been a fictional character. The only other thing I think as well, while we're on this topic, is, there's so much real world impact here as well. You know how when we look at all the movies and TV shows that have been done about autism, right? Autism is, the autistic character is nearly almost always a white male with savant syndrome. Like almost every movie or TV show I can think of, it's a white male with savant syndrome. And people often think that this kind of accurate representation doesn't matter, but it does, because as we know, women and people of color are often underdiagnosed with autism compared to white men. And I truly believe a big reason for that is the diagnostic process never starts with seeing a specialist, right? You never go straight to the autism specialist. It always starts with a pediatrician or general practitioner, or therapist or someone referring you. And when the pediatricians and general practitioners are getting their information about autism, often they're watching the same movies and TV shows that we are. So when all they are seeing on the TV and on movies is non-disabled actors playing stereotypical white male autistic people with savant syndrome like Rain Man, that's what they're expecting to see walk into their office. And if someone walks into their office who doesn't match what they've seen on the movies or in TV, that person might not get referred to the expert who actually knows more about autism than they do. Yep. So this representation just has so many real world ramifications that affect our lives in such real ways, affect the laws about us. As you know, many people, currently there's no federal minimum wage for many people with developmental disabilities. Many developmental people with disabilities get paid, gosh, I have to find this study and I'll post it.
Yeah, it's driving me nuts too. It's like, I'm thinking about it while we're talking. It's like, yeah, it's less than minimum wage by far.
What the national law is that there is no minimum wage. It's not even a number. It's that the employer gets to pick whatever number they feel is adequate. As well, currently there's a very old Supreme Court case that has just never actually been changed that says if someone has a developmental or intellectual disability, the state is actually allowed to, I forget what the word is, but sterilize people with developmental or intellectual disabilities. There was a great Radiolab episode. If you look up Radiolab, and I believe Lydia XY was interviewed on the episode, but there's a great Radiolab episode about this.
Lydia's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Such a great Radiolab episode, but there are so many laws that are so discriminatory against autistic people, and we just have so much less of a chance to change these when we are not getting to tell our story to the people ourselves through the mainstream media.
So let's backtrack a little bit. And
absolutely, I apologize.
No worries, and thank you for all the because this is the topic that everyone is talking about right now. Yeah. And if Sia will respond, and what will the future look like? I know BuzzFeed did an article that highlighted you, highlighted Alex Plank, highlighted Andrew Duff, 5 autistic actors, which was great. And I definitely think there needs to be more representation. A few of the comments that are coming in, thank you all again for commenting. If you have any questions for Mickey, please post them in the comments. Somebody mentioned, thank you so much. As a Black person, there is a lack of intersectionality, especially for my son who has autism. And when I worked on as a autistic entertainment consultant, my first film focused on a teenager who was Black, which was incredible. The second one was a girl, because I feel like a lot of times girls fall through the cracks, especially in entertainment. And then the third, on Mrs. Fletcher, which I consulted on, was focused on a nonverbal character, and there was really not a lot of representation for nonverbal. So I sound like a broken record at times. Dr. Stephen Shore, one of my favorite people in the world, says if you met one, you met one. And I feel like the entertainment industry definitely needs to revolve around that. So Mickey,
it's just about being more creative too, that it's so easy to tell the same stereotypical story over and over again. It's more challenging to be creative and find a new story to tell. But it's easier when you involve autistic people, because again, we're some of the best creative problem solvers in the world. All people with disabilities are some of the best creative problem solvers in the world, because we've been having to be creative problem solvers every day to navigate normal situations that aren't necessarily accessible for us. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
No, you're good. No, I'm glad you mentioned that, because when you said that, I was just thinking about all the sequels I keep seeing and all the remakes of films and Broadway shows. And I'm just like, come on. So Mickey, tell us a little bit about when you were diagnosed and what were some of your early challenges growing up on the spectrum?
Absolutely. So I was in special ed through high school. I was in special education. I did speech therapy and occupational therapy all through middle school, but I was actually not told that I was autistic at any point during all of that. So I'm also visually impaired. I'm legally blind. which is why before we started, I asked you to read the comments for me if there were questions. So I'd always been told that I was in special ed, speech therapy, occupational therapy because of my eyesight, that was the reason I had all these things, which later I've now, after talking to more people, have been learned that that was not the case. But so then when I got into college, I decided not to give my college my IEP, and to just try to do the thing by myself, which is not ideal. I would not recommend. Would not recommend. And then after trying that, I ended up seeing a therapist who referred me to somewhere else. And I ended up at the UW Adult Autism Clinic, where I got diagnosed to my face, and found out that I was autistic because I had not been told previously. You know, I grew up in a time where, because of the media representations of autism, there was a lot of stigma. People didn't actually necessarily know what it meant to be autistic or whether you were going to be discriminated against. And so because of that, I just hadn't been told that I was autistic. So, but I had always known my whole life that I didn't have any friends really growing up. That when people spoke to me, I knew people always kind of spoke to me in a different voice than they spoke to other people in, if that makes any sense.
No, it does.
It does. Yeah. People always kind of used a higher pitched voice, or, oh, that's so great. Kind of, you know, they always just spoke to me very differently and treated me very differently than they treated everyone else.
Talk, kind of like baby talk in instances for me, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I never knew whether I was just bad or stupid, or I didn't know what was wrong with me. As soon as I found out as an adult that actually you're autistic, and that's likely why you were in special ed, that's likely why you had speech therapy and occupational therapy and all that, it was such a relief to me, because all of a sudden I knew I'm not bad, I'm not stupid. There's actually a word for what I am, and it's autistic. Right. And now I had the ability to learn about myself, to learn that I had both weaknesses and strengths, and I could specify what those weaknesses are, and I could specify what those strengths were, and learn more about myself, and learn based on the whole community that I've been with.
Mickey, based on our conversation, I love this question that just came in, because I feel like it coincides with what you were just talking about. So Sue writes, hi, Sue. And she says, just wondering at what point you felt you knew who you are, rather than copying and masking as an actor, and generally fading into an allistic world. So I think what she's referring to, allistic, is just
non-autistic. Absolutely. Yeah. Gosh, I think I was very fortunate. You know, I like to think my grandparents basically raised me for a lot of time, and when I was with them, I got to just play and be in very unstructured environment, you know, running around as a pirate or a clown. So I feel so fortunate that because of them, I really always knew who I was and always felt that I got to be myself. So instead of masking being the first thing, I think, as that comment suggests, and then me having to work to find who I was, for me, it was the opposite, where I really knew clearly who I was. I really enjoyed my life so much, had so much fun, and really loved myself and loved who I was, but didn't understand how to interact with society in any way. And then I remember at some point, like maybe in 7th, 8th grade, possibly, almost toward the start of high school, probably, I remember having a realization, because I could not figure out small talk. Often people would say hi to me, and I would just ignore them and keep walking. Or I just could not figure it out. So I avoided, and didn't engage. And at one point I remember realizing that nearly all of the conversations that I witnessed happening around me were following just like a structure that I could really easily repeat. People would say, "Hi, how are you doing today?" And then, or "Hey, how are you?" or something like that. And then the other person says, "Good, how about you?" And then the other person says, "Great, thanks so much for asking. Have a great rest of your day." And I remember feeling like I'd cracked the small talk thing, and that I could just repeat that script, that I could repeat that 4-sentence script. "Hi, how are you doing today?" "Great, how about yourself?" "Not too bad, thanks for asking. Have a great rest of your day." If I could just repeat that, I knew the answers were always going to be the same, and that I could always find a way to engage with someone where it would happen nearly identically every time. So I think that first I knew who I was, and then I had to work really hard to create scripts for myself to be able to fit in, if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. I feel like masking is a topic that kind of falls through the cracks also a lot in our community because people don't understand some of the burnout that some people face because they want to feel like we talk so much about autism awareness, but we don't talk enough about acceptance. And I feel like a lot of the times that's a challenge. So Heather writes, and she asked, when did you become verbal?
Great question. Also, something I've just recently learned after posting the Huffington Post article. I've been asked by people who are still currently non-vocal, and I didn't know this until just this month. I've been asked to use the word non-vocal instead of non-verbal. I guess that's the term that people who are currently non-vocal are preferring right now. And that was really interesting to me, but I just learned that.
Huh.
I was, before elementary school, I had been communicating with a made-up sign language that I had created for myself. It was not actual baby sign language or American Sign Language or anything like that. It was just signs that I had created for myself that I could use with my family. So I remember like one story that I'd been told that I remember is asking for an ice cream cone with signing for an ice cream cone. And as soon as I got it, sharing with my grandma and putting it in her face. Which is like a metaphor for life as an autistic person, because you are always trying to be kind, trying to like reach out for human connection. You're always trying to make a human connection, and yet it always fails somewhere along the line. And it's like a clown too. I'm a clown. I do clowning in theater, and it's the same way that clowns and autistic people, we are always reaching for that human connection, striving for that human connection, doing whatever we can to get it, but it always fails every time. So then at some point, I don't know, with Heather's question, I think it was more it wasn't like, here's a date that it changed. It wasn't all of a sudden immediately non-vocal and then vocal. Because so then I know that in like first grade and stuff, I was able to be vocal, but people couldn't understand me, if that makes sense. So I was vocal, but only like only people in my family could understand me, and teachers often could not understand what I was saying. If that
makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, I was nonverbal until I was about 3, and then didn't start speaking complete sentences till I was about 7. So some people have been writing in and asking about what is be verbal. So in the autism community, there's some people who are nonverbal. It doesn't mean that they're unintelligent. It just means they find other ways to communicate. So Mickey, then this is a question that I've been wanting to ask you. obviously Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime was a huge moment. I saw so many articles and videos that you were in where you got to talk a lot about also autism advocacy as well, which I found super important. But up to this point in your life, what would you say was one of your greatest accomplishments?
Ooh, that is such a good question. Such a hard question to answer. What has been one of my greatest accomplishments? Okay, two things that I was really proud of is, or you know what, I'll put it one. I was really excited to get to play Amadeus, to play Mozart in the play Amadeus. And that felt really special to me and really exciting to me, because that was the first time the first time in years and years and years and years that I got to play a role where autism was not the first descriptor of the character. Like in a character description, almost every single character that I've even gotten to audition for ever, I was auditioning because the first word in the character description is autistic. And Mozart was really exciting and fun and interesting because autism is not what the play is about. Yeah. And I feel like autistic people, right? Our lives are not about autism. We are autistic, but we live lives where not every day the biggest challenge in my life is not always autism. I have other things that I deal with in my life as well sometimes, that where those challenges come through the lens of autism. Autism affects those things, but autism is not the plot of my life, not the full plot of my life. And so playing Mozart was really exciting because it was a play that was not about autism, yet at the same time, the more and more I learned, I realized Mozart is autistic, and I still get to be myself. I still get to bring that component of myself to the role, even though that's not necessarily what the audience will be looking for and seeing. Mozart also did not understand social interactions necessarily, didn't fit in, didn't respect the social hierarchy or the social ladder because he didn't necessarily understand how it worked, or he wasn't able to see it the same way other people could see it. He didn't have any executive functioning. He died poor and broke, with his wife handling all the bills for him, handling all of the executive functioning kind of aspects of life for him. So it was really fun to get to play a character where I got to bring all those pieces of myself to the character, and yet he was not described as autistic character.
Yeah, and that's so important too, because I think of Alex Plank, who, you know, Alex is great. He did, for people who don't know Alex, he started wrongplanet.net, a platform for individuals and their families who are on the autism spectrum to communicate and interact with each other in a forum type of setting. And when he was casted on The Good Doctor, it wasn't an autistic character. He was just an autistic actor playing a character, no relationship to autism. And I found that very powerful, because I feel like sometimes it's like they put us in a box in many instances. You know what I mean? It's like, for example, with my role as an autism entertainment consultant, sometimes I know a lot about physical disabilities simply because I do this video series and I meet so many incredible self-advocates and get to learn from them. But like every single time I feel like I go on a project, they're like, all right, we have this autism character. And I'm like, I know I'm autistic, but I have so many more elements that I could bring to a project. Mm-hmm. So Mickey, we have a few more questions coming in. Yeah. I like this one. And we kind of talked a little bit about it, just like what helped you growing up. But Sarah writes, hi, Sarah. What did your family do for you that was most helpful growing up? and what was missing that would have helped you? So not necessarily from your perspective on what helped you the most, but from a family perspective on what they may have done for you.
Gosh, that's really complicated. I think the best thing that non-autistic parents who have autistic children can do to help their children, that did not happen for me, but would have been such a big help for me, is firstly not getting frustrated or scared that your child has autism, understanding that autism comes with weaknesses and strengths, and that you can't embrace the weaknesses. You shouldn't embrace the weaknesses unless you also embrace the strengths. You shouldn't focus on the weaknesses solely unless you're also going to focus on the strengths. And the strengths might be different for every individual, right? Yeah. But I guarantee you, every individual on the spectrum, no matter who they are or how they communicate with the outside world or what accommodations they might need, every autistic individual has strengths that are unique to them because of their autism. Just as every autistic individual, no matter who they are, how they communicate or interact with the world, has weaknesses and things that are so much harder in their life because of their autism. So I think focusing on both of those equally, giving both of those equal weight is important, one. And two, also reaching out to autistic adults is so important.
Preach.
Obviously, your child better than anyone else. That child is your child, and you will always know them better than anyone else. And no one's trying to take that away from you in any way. No one is doubting that in any way. But at the same time, often our society as a whole forgets that every single autistic child is going to become an autistic adult, right? I often play a game where if you have someone picture an autistic person in their head, non-autistic people usually almost always picture a child. And even though...
Yeah, absolutely. That's the popular image, it feels like.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And we forget that just because all the resources and programs for autistic people end when those kids turn 18, autistic people often after they turn 18 start to disappear, whether they are able to live independently and start disappearing more into either disappearing into unemployment or disappear because they are masking well enough to be employed, or whether they are not able to be quite as independent and disappearing into different facilities. Autistic people start to disappear over the age of 18. And we need to remember every autistic child is going to become an autistic adult. And that while you know your child better than anyone else on earth, an autistic adult knows how your child might experience the world through the lens of autism better than a non-autistic person, because they too have experienced the world through autism, whereas a non-autistic person just hasn't. That's just not a life experience.
First person perspective, I mean, being able to live through those experiences is just so important to the overall. I feel like a lot of times I go to present at a different conference and they start talking about like, oh, we have these incredible experts, but then they don't mention like the self-advocate experts, because self-advocates in their own right are the experts. So listen Absolutely. To us, because we want to help steer the conversation based on our experiences. So Mickey, what's next for you, and what can we get excited about? Any future projects, maybe post-COVID?
Absolutely. Well, right now I'm actually, I've just been picked up by a literary agent named Allison Helligers. So hello, Allison, if you're watching. Hi, Allie. And we are working together on a number of really exciting projects. Some picture book about disability, as well as a picture book about autism, as well as an adult book that is more of a memoir kind of experience. But hopefully it'll just read like a novel and read like a really exciting story about my life, but specifically through the lens of autism. So that's what's next. Where right now it's being pitched to publishing companies, which is really exciting. And you can help me by, if you follow me on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter at the Mickey Rowe, MickeyRowe, then that'll really just help, as that'll help Allie do her job better as she is explaining to publishers why having autistic people talk about autism is so important, and why Own Voices representation of autism is so important, and that there's actually a need for that and people craving that.
I love that. So for everyone watching, I included the links to Mickey's the social media links in the Facebook comments. What I'll do after we go on live is I'll pin it to the top. So definitely check him out, like him on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So Mickey, is there anything else you would like for people at home to know about your story?
Gosh, about my story, I don't know that. I think what is so important for other people to know is it is so scary. When you are on the autism spectrum, it is so scary to be yourself, because everything that we have learned through our lived experience growing up is that when I'm myself, because everyone always says, just be yourself, just be yourself. But for autistic people, what we often learn is when I am myself, I get in trouble. Or when I am myself, people look at me funny in the supermarket. Or when I am my honest self, people misunderstand me or don't want to be my friends. So it's really scary to be yourself. But what I think is so important for people to know is do it anyway. It is so worth it, so valuable. It's sort of like jumping off a diving board, where it's scary, but the payoff is so huge. If I had not been myself, right? If I had not kept trying, even though I'd failed so many times, I would not have gotten to play Christopher Boone in The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. I would not have gotten to speak at the Lincoln Center or on Broadway at the Gershwin Theater. I like all the exciting, wonderful things that have happened in my life now that I'm 30 years old, having a family. All these wonderful things only happened because every time I failed, I said, that's okay. I'm still going to be myself. I'm still going to get up and try again. I'm still going to jump off this diving board, even though it's scary. And that if you keep trying, you will fail. As autistic people, just like as anyone else, we will fail. Failure is a part of life, but that doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It just means you gotta keep trying again and again, because everyone fails in life. Autistic people fail sometimes more in different ways than other people, in ways that feel more personal sometimes. But that failing just means you're trying, and that's evidence that you're on the right track, and you should just keep going. If you give up and stop trying, stop being yourself, then you're letting yourself down, because you're not allowing yourself to find out what happens when you reach the end. You're missing out on future opportunities for yourself.
The entire time, and that was beautiful, by the way. I was thinking in the back of my head, though, you're 30. You don't look 30. You definitely look like mid-20s, and I'm 32, and like my hairline is going all the way back now. So
I'm 32 as well. My hairline is I wish I had your hair. I will trade you hairlines.
Oh, goodness. But yes, Mickey, we appreciate your time today. For everyone watching at home, this is part of our ongoing self-advocate video series where we celebrate neurodiversity. If you know of any self-advocates that you would like us to spotlight and amplify their stories next, please contact our Facebook page, contact me at carriemagra@gmail.com. And Mickey, I can't thank you enough. Please, again, follow Mickey on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And we're really just excited to hear more about just your stuff going forward, especially after COVID-19 with the book. Will this be your first book ever?
Absolutely, it will. Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Awesome. So definitely be on the lookout for that, everyone. And again, thank you, Mickey. And thank you all for your great questions. And I hope you have a great rest of the evening. And thank you again to Mickey.
Thank you so much. Such an honor to speak to you guys. Thank you all.